الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بالإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So we continue discussing the book Al-Mulakhis al-Fiqhi by Sheikh Salih Fawzan Hafidullah Ta'ala, and we've been discussing Kitab al-Nikah, and we have reached the bab where he discusses fil muharramat fil nikah, those females that it are those that are you are not allowed to marry, so those that you are not allowed to marry. So in the last lesson that we had, that the author rahimahullah, that the ulama and the author that they divide regarding of those that you are not allowed to marry in that you are not allowed to marry into two categories. So you have two broad categories of those that you are not allowed to marry. The first category that we discussed of those that al-muharramat ala ta'bid, that those that you are not allowed to marry, which is you are not allowed to marry them at all. So those, the first group are those that you are not allowed to marry under any circumstance. Then the second category are those that you are not allowed to marry due to a reason. So it is something we are not allowed to marry for certain reasons, and he will explain those reasons. So as for the first that we'll be discussing regarding al-muharramat ala ta'bid, that you are not allowed to marry at all, that they put them into four categories. That they mention one of those ones that they mention regarding, who recall, the first category they are not allowed to marry. They fall under due to sabab. Therefore, a nasab, aywa.
Not relations.
So you have nasab, and they mention regarding concerning of nasab, they mention what? 8 or 7 categories. Mm-hmm. So seven categories of women that you are not allowed to marry. So your mother will be your mom, your daughters, your sisters. So they mentioned that daughters that you may have, whether those daughters are from a halal relationship or from haram relationship, you're still not allowed to marry them. And they mention others regarding concerning that your sisters, your sisters' daughters, and the likes. Also, you're not allowed to marry your sisters, whether those sisters is from both parents, or they're from your father's side only, or she's your sister from your mother's side only. Then also they mention regarding of those concerning al-amma wal-khala, that your paternal aunt or your maternal aunt, that you are not allowed to marry from both those two categories. Then he went on to mention the second category, that he mentions that according to this, he mentioned, according to, what's the reason he mentioned? Mula'ana. So mula'ana, that are those that have cursed each other. So that would be a case where between a wife and an husband, that one have accused the other of zina. So one have accused the other, which is a serious accusation, but they do not have sufficient evidence regarding witnesses. So in that case, the wife and the husband, then they can bring the curse upon each other regarding in that case. So if this was to occur, that they bring the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon themselves, then they have to be separated. They have to be separated and not allowed to marry each other forever in the future. Then I mentioned the third category regarding al-rida', which is case of due to suckling from a woman, which would be other than your mother. So a person was to suckle from a lady, that she becomes haram for you to marry, or daughters. Their daughters become as if your sisters, also her aunts, her mother also fall in the same category, Then I mentioned after this concerning other case regarding, this is musahara, which is musahara, which is case regarding it's in-laws, which is case regarding that certain category of people that due to certain reason that you're not allowed to marry them due to you have married into that family. So of those cases that they mention, so the more general one, that if a man marries a lady, so any woman that your father married, you are not allowed to marry them, and also that lady's mothers. So anyone that your father marry, then you're not allowed to marry that lady forever. She becomes like a mahram for you forever. Then you have that category. Then also that if you marry a lady, then her mother becomes haram upon you. So from the time that you marry that lady, so from the time that everything has been said ijab al-qabul have taken place, said that the marriage contract has been carried out, then from that point the mother becomes haram upon you. Then the second scenario concerning that's the usul, the mother. Then as for the furu, which would be the daughter. So the ones below concern the daughter. If you were to marry a lady, her daughter becomes haram only when you have consummated the marriage with the mother. So for example, that you marry a lady, not married Alyssa. So you married a lady, and before you consummate, you divorce her, or she died. Then you are allowed to marry the daughter according to majority of the ulama. Because some are concerned that in that case, for example, if she was to die, they say al-maut yuqim maqam at-talaq al-dukhul. So some of the ulama that if she was to die, then that will be as if it will take the place of that, as if you consummated. But majority of the ulama reject that view. So overall so that's concerning, or if you were, so you're about to marry a lady, everything had been agreed upon, and the marriage certificate had been written up. You came to the masjid, but before the act of nikah took place, they decide not to carry through on the marriage. You can still, in that case, marry her daughter. Clear? So her daughter becomes haram only when you have had intimacy or consummation of the marriage. Of the ulama who mentioned regarding concern of the condition, also regarding that, if the daughter, that you also, some put a condition that one, for you to allow consummation, plus she have to live within your household. So if you marry a lady, consummate, but she has a daughter that lives with her father elsewhere, some said you can marry. But al-qawl rajih, that's not the case. The proper view is that not the case. The fact that whether she lives within the home, live with you or away from you, then you're not allowed. The fact that you have consummate with her mother. So you have those cases that they mention. Another case that a man marries a lady who already have a daughter from a previous relationship, and he has a son from another relationship. So both have a daughter and a son. He has a son, example, he has a son or a daughter, but say he has a son, and the wife, she has a daughter. Those two, that son from his child, his son and her daughter, they're allowed to marry each other.
Yeah.
Hey.
So in that case, the stepdaughter needs to wear hijab.
Hey, so generally concerned, if you reach a certain age, then they become like that. They are foreigners. Now, so the sense that because they could get married.
So what, even if the son of the brother drinks the breast milk?
No, then they fall into a different category. Oh. She becomes haram because, so you might find in those cases that so that will fall into a different category that we mentioned before, for example, rida'a. So that fall into the ruling of he becomes forbidden due to that reason of he breastfed from that lady.
Oh, okay.
But if he was not under normal circumstance, she has a daughter, and the man, he has a son. Those two children can still marry. So the father could marry the mother, and his son can marry her daughter. And it's halal. Anyway, so those are the cases that they mentioned regarding of the cases. We have completed the ones regarding those, isn't it? They mentioned something just to add regarding these cases that of the ulama they have discussed that is not mentioned. But what else can someone add, especially because we live in the West?
The father, I was thinking the father and the mother, if they have a baby,
together.
Yeah, then that would be the brother or sister of a husband and wife.
So he becomes the sister from the mother side due to the mother, and you understand, but so he be the one that bring them together, but still those two other ones, they're still allowed to marry each other.
They've got no blood link.
They have no blood link between them. There's no link by way of blood between them.
That's mad.
A next case that is mentioned just for, I was thinking, they mentioned also, the ulama mentioned regarding concern that these type of cases regarding marriages occur. So they mentioned concern in the case concern is that marriages, so we're speaking about marriages occur. But also let's mention that if a man, for example, if a man before in Jahiliyyah, he was to have a relationship, a man and a woman have a relationship with a girl, or he had any form of intimacy with a girl. A man has some intimacy with a girl in a haram way, whether by a one-night stand, by girlfriend, boyfriend, baby mother, and all those things. But they have had intimacy. But they didn't get married. But they had intimacy. The same rule regarding that woman that he had intimacy with, I said in Jahiliyyah, or they committed zina, or they forced themselves upon her, the fact that they had intimacy, the same rule applies regarding her family members also, that he cannot marry the one that we had mentioned before. So he cannot marry her mother, can't marry her aunt, so he becomes, so that same group of people we mentioned before becomes haram upon him. Because the fact that he had intimacy with her. So when I find, for example, if a case was to occur, that in Jahiliyyah, just a person before Islam, that he had a girlfriend. And then after, so they broke up, he became Muslim. Then years after, that girl, that was his ex in Jahiliyyah, accepted Islam and her mother. Then also, he cannot marry the mother. He cannot marry the mother because of that previous relationship that they had by way of some intimacy or occurred between both. So that's also the rule applies in those cases.
Is that with two sisters as well?
You can't marry that girl's
Auntie.
sister.
Yeah, that would be her aunt.
Yeah, you can't marry her.
Hey, yes, I said the same rule applies. The same rule applies regarding that group of women, catchment of women becomes haram. So it says, so even though it said it occurred, so any woman that you had relation with, then the rules apply across the board. So a person, say maybe by way of, said Jahiliyyah, zina, by way of even forcing oneself, the fact that intimacy, some form of relationship or sexual act occurred, then that applies also. So that's concerning those masail that some kind of, so let us pick up from where we had stopped, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala.
Yeah, you ready, yeah? Bismillahi wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillahi qalama Allah. Second, women temporarily prohibited for one to marry. They are of two kinds. A, women prohibited for one to marry due to simultaneous marriages. It is prohibited for one to marry two sisters and have them as wives at the same time. Allah exalted be He says, prohibited to you that you take in marriage two sisters simultaneously. Surah An-Nisa, ayah 23. It is also prohibited to take in marriage a woman and her paternal or maternal aunt at the same time. This is because the Prophet ﷺ said, a man is prohibited to marry both a woman and her paternal aunt or a woman and her maternal aunt at the same time. Related by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ...
Yes, I mentioned regarding concern in this case regarding that al-jam bayna al-mar'a wa ammatiha wa khalatiha, that this particular case that is being mentioned regarding al-jam between, in that case regarding the woman and her aunt, paternal or maternal aunt, that is not mentioned by way of the ayah. So that is, this case is an additional from what is by way of the sunnah. So the Sunnah come with a ruling that is not per se mentioned in the Quran. So the Sunnah come with a ruling like adding to what is mentioned in the Quran by making forbidden this type of case. Aywa.
The Prophet ﷺ showed the idea behind such prohibition, as he said, if you did so, then you would sever your ties of kinship. This is because fellow wives usually feel jealous towards each other, so if they were relatives, such as marriage would cause severing the ties of their kinship. However, if a woman is divorced and her prescribed waiting period is over, her sister and her paternal or maternal aunt become lawful for her ex-husband to marry, as the reason for prohibition is not there anymore.
Hey, so that's the case regarding that to combine between two sisters at one point is haram. But if one was to, in whatever way that have ended that marriage by way of either talaq and she finished her iddah, or by way of one of that sister, that wife have passed away, then he can marry her sister. Then he can marry her other sisters.
But see, what changes this situation is zina.
Huh?
So if they commit zina, then it can never be done ever again. But marriage, obviously.
We're going to discuss zina. Would be you're going to discuss concerning the case of zina. So also, for example, in some cultures or some practices among some that, for example, a brother, your brothers that I have a brother. He's married, and his wife passed away. Or my brother passed away and leave behind his wife with children. Then for like the brother will remain for him now to marry that woman. So you find in certain practice or certain cultures, you might find that practice is present. So in that case, I would not concern came about Uthman anhu that he married both the Prophet Islam daughter, one after the other. So he showed that it is permissible.
Do you know, as I mentioned, with regards to the wife's aunt, at the time you're married to a woman, her aunt is haram for you to marry her. But if you're divorced from her and the id is finished, then you can marry her aunt.
Correct.
So, in the case of whilst you're married to a woman, you're not mahram for her aunt, are you?
You're not mahram. You're not mahram. So in these cases that you mentioned, these cases like a temporary alt and marrying those people. So it's a temporary situation due to the circumstance at the moment where, because you're married one of that family member, you cannot double up with certain members. But if it is removed, but it doesn't mean that those like the sister become a mahram to you. Now she's still a non-mahram, but it's just you're not allowed to marry her due to the circumstance at the moment.
It's just the mother, the grandmother.
That group, yeah. They're the ones who are forbidden permanently. These ones are temporary, but they're still not mahram.
So it's not related, but it's sort of related. Are you mahram for your mother-in-law?
Mother-in-law?
Yeah, like your wife's mum, are you mahram?
You're mahram, yeah.
Ah, that's good.
So the one that I mentioned before regarding the one that you're not allowed, then you serve like a mahram for them. So we're going to concern if your wife's family or mother, or daughter, you become like a mahram after, you understand? So you become a mahram for those members. Aywa.
So just to add, and I don't know if he's going to mention it, that obviously the permissibility of marrying someone, obviously because they mentioned mahara marriage, so if two cousins are allowed to get married to each other, but if they breastfed from the same person, they can't. It gets dropped, basically.
Correct.
He doesn't mention from parents, aunties, sisters, that there's two cousins breastfeed from the same woman.
Based upon they breastfed from that woman, so that becomes the reason, not because they're cousin, but that factor. Just like two stranger, but they breastfed from the same lady, then they can't marry in the future. Aywa.
One is also prohibited to have more than 4 women as wives at the same time. This is because Allah exalted.
It says one is?
Yeah, more than 4 wives. Yeah.
Repeat from the top what it says.
One is also prohibited
to
have more than 4 wives at the same time. This is because Allah exalted be He says, then marry those that please you of other women, 2, 3 or 4. Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 3. The Prophet ﷺ ordered those new converts to Islam who had more than 4 wives under their authority to choose just 4 of them.
Yes, I find many hadiths regarding the Sahaba that they had even 8 wives. And the Prophet ﷺ told them so in that case regarding that if you have more than 4 and you came into Islam, then you have to separate some and only can retain only 4. So it becomes wajib in that case that he has anything excessive, anything above 4, they have to be separated. They have to be separated. So it becomes wajib to do so. Aywa.
B. Women prohibited for one to marry due to contingent matters. It is prohibited to marry a widow or a divorced woman in her legal waiting period for Allah exalted be He says, and do not determine to undertake a marriage contract until the decreed period reaches its end. Surah Baqarah ayat 235. The idea behind such prohibition is that the widow or the divorced woman might be pregnant, which might lead to lineal confusion and intermingling. It is also prohibited for one to marry a woman who has committed zina, adultery or fornication.
So they mentioned regarding the matter before they mentioned the woman that is in her iddah. So for the woman in her iddah, so if she's in her iddah, then for a person who, then she's not allowed to be married. So either you have two scenarios that a case where if she's like in a talaq al-raj'i iddah, then she's still technically married as we had mentioned before. So only the husband can marry her. No one else can come into the picture and try to propose to her because she's in a talaq al-raj'i. So she's technically still married to her husband until he returns her back. But during the iddah, no one else can propose to her at all. Or she's second case is that a talaq al-ba'in, where she's gone through her three talaq al-talaq, and she's now waiting and she cannot go back, return back to her husband at all. Then in that case, that the ulama mentioned that, so in that case also during the iddah period, she's not allowed to marry until she have completed her iddah. Because she's still, so while she's in, so generally, so another case that they mentioned, so and also a woman also who may be hamil, and her iddah is until she gives birth. That sometimes may exceed, at times may exceed the normal 3 months or 3 cycles. So the woman that is pregnant, her iddah goes until she gives birth. She goes until she gives birth. A case in that, so said the one that is pregnant, her iddah goes until she gives birth. So for example, in a marriage, and her iddah, she gave birth last month. Or which month we're in? Let's say 3 weeks ago. She gave birth 3 weeks ago. And so when she gave birth, now that marriage with the first person is completely, that's gone. But she have given birth now, so she's released completely from that ex-husband. She's going through her nifas, or which is her after child bleeding. After all, they mention that she can get married because that nifas is not her iddah. Her iddah was until she gives birth. But when she gives birth, she naturally have a bleeding after. Now, she can get married during that period of the nifas, but just no intercourse. Clear? There's a difference. So the iddah for the one who is pregnant is up until she gives birth. So she can get married after. If she was to get married but still going through her nifas, her bleeding.
So how come the ulama don't put the same ruling of when a woman's divorcing a woman while she's on her cycle? They say that you're not allowed to divorce a woman when she's on her cycle. How come they don't say, because she's on her cycle, she's in a state of janaba. So they bring a ruling of not divorcing her. And the fast is the same like janaba. I mean, the fast is just like haid. So why don't they take the same ruling and say,
Now say-
wait till she finishes bleeding?
And so we're discussing two matters. We have the rules of divorce and the rules of marriage. Now, so divorce have its own separate regarding divorcing a lady. It has its own set of rules. And to marry doesn't necessarily follow those rules. So for example, just say a woman you want to marry, Zayd min al-Nas, this person named Zayd, he wants to marry Fatima. But the time that they have agreed to get married is a time that she came on her cycle. But everything already arranged. Hall have been booked, Imam is booked, everyone invited. Nam. So the planning kind of somewhat, her cycle, for example, her cycle come a few days early for a time that she was expected or delayed. But she was still on her cycle. But everything is set for the day to get married. He can still marry her. Clear? So he can still marry her. So the rules of nikah, getting married, acting nikah, and divorce is two different matters.
So the matter is not based on
So it's not about this is about the height. And not about per se the height. That's in
it's not based on a state. I thought I'm just
as they say. So whether she's a someone says for nikah, then no. Only so that if she have gone through her iddah, so we said that with the matter regarding her iddah, that yes, you cannot marry her during her iddah. It may vary regarding the iddah. So she may be going through a bleeding, but it's not per se her iddah.
I think also someone mentioned that you see cycles as well to see about the pregnancy on a talaq when there's no known pregnancy. So when it's known that she's pregnant, the iddah is until she gives birth as well.
So we said the ahkam of talaq inshallah will come, inshallah. But aywa. So these are cases where in these situations that I mentioned to you, a temporary can't marry if she's going through an iddah. If she's going through her iddah. And those cases may varies. Aywa.
It's also prohibited for one to marry a woman who has committed zina, adultery or fornication if one knows about it until she repents and her waiting period is over. Allah exalted be He says, and none marries her except a fornicator or a polytheist, and that i.e. marriage to such persons has been unlawful to the believer. The believers, Surah Nur, Ayat 3.
So they mentioned also of those cases where that temporary that woman or man cannot get married due to a zina. But so if zina was to occur, which is marriage outside wedlock, then with those matters regarding one can still marry with those two conditions. At tawbah, they make repentance if one was fall into zina, and one make tawbah from what they have done, and also for the female that she have completed. We said they mentioned iddah, but Allah mentioned istibra, which is like the next until she see her next cycle to see if she is pregnant or not. Then she can get married. So with zina, after main condition is a tawbah, and the second is that for a woman that she have to wait until her next cycle to see whether she's pregnant or not. Then if she's not pregnant, she have completed, then she can get married. So those are the conditions. And it mentioned if one knows. So those are the cases concerning that one aware of the situation.
I want to ask something not controversial, but because many people now when they go to get married, and they try to say that they have to expose their sins to someone. They don't have to expose their sins. They're saying it's haram to marry a zan. Then that person has to say that he commits zina.
The condition.
Yeah, but they have to know that he commits.
So the person fall into zina, yes, he knows, he's aware that he fell into zina. But it's not a condition that you ever tell the imam who's doing it or tell the witnesses. You understand? Because the tawbah first, you understand? Because I'm not sure, the wording goes يحرم تزوج الزانية إذا علم زناها حتى يتوب. So that so you find case regarding concern that yes, if so either you find those scenario that the people want to get married, the ones who are involved in the zina, right? But it's not a criteria, it's not a must, and also there's no need for them to kind of somewhat to profess or mention their sin to those who are present. Now, so I said if they make tawbah, which is between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So that tawbah doesn't have to, they have to do it publicly. And also she have completed their iddah, then khalas. As for the man, there's no iddah for the man, so it's just for him to make tawbah. Now, so that tawbah, and it will be in most cases will be between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding that what he have done is wrong, he have left that sin, and not going to go back to it and try to follow the right way, and of those way, getting married. Now, but the tawbah is not something that needs to be mentioned publicly. Doesn't need to be mentioned publicly. That becomes a case where if it is, as we may discuss, regarding cases where it's apparent that something is wrong. You know what I mean? That they can see signs that the woman they want to get married, but you can see that she has a belly. Now, then that's the next matter. Regarding concerning if she's pregnant. Now, so you have like a sign that is there, indicates that there's something that zina. So that's for the person that if these things are known to the person carrying out, then for us to get some clarity. Now, so and that would mean that I would to be discussed that in that case regarding the ulama, that of those who mention or take the position that not to get married, she's not allowed to get married until after she have given birth. Whether to the person who got her pregnant or even more so, she can't marry someone else. But the discussion is regarding, is she allowed during the time of her pregnancy to marry the person who got her pregnant? But as for the person who did get her pregnant, then no. As for the one who got her pregnant, then of those who mentioned, he can do so. Like the Ahnaf that mentioned, it can be done, but Allahu Alam, but ideally to let it, as they say, until she gives birth. But that's what said. That's when it is apparent. But it is not apparent then a tawbah between them and Allah. When I mention الزانية لا ينكح إلا زان أو مشرك. So it mention age, which is that al-mushrik. As to be discussed regarding concern that what can be taken from it, what is apparent, is what? That a person fell into zina, male or female. This one mentioned zani also, that you are allowed to marry a person who is a zani or a mushrika or mushrik. Nam, which means that a Muslim woman marrying a person, a man that is a kafir. So this part, said this was mentioned mushrik, then that part is abrogated, as to be discussed by other verses. So that verse is abrogated, or that part of the ayah, by way of his ruling, is abrogated. Because a Muslim woman is not allowed to marry a mushrik under any circumstance, or even a person from Ahl Kitab. So that portion is mansukh, is abrogated. Aywa.
So the ayah is actually talking about a woman.
That answer the article about man and woman, but it said that was initially something that was revealed, that was allowed, but eventually it was removed. A part of the ruling regarding that at some point then Muslim women are not allowed to be touched by a non-Muslim man, regardless. And also a Muslim man, he only given an exemption regarding married a non-Muslim, those are said to be Ahl Kitab, as to be discussed regarding nikah al-kuffar. But just to clarify that ayah, as also it will be discussed again later, bidnillahi ta'ala. Aywa tafaddal.
One is prohibited to remarry the woman whom he has divorced by 3 pronouncements of divorce until she validly gets married to another husband. Allah exalted be, he says, divorce is twice. Surah Baqarah, ayat 229. Then Allah says, and if he has divorced her for the third time, then she is not lawful to him afterward until after she marries a husband other than him. Surah Baqarah, ayat 230.
And also that regarding concerning them, that also they have to have intimacy. So get married, but also they have to consummate the marriage. Aywa.
It is prohibited for one to marry a muhrim woman until she gets out of her state of ihram.
Yeah, so regarding concerning marriage, also the person in the state of either Hajj or Umrah. So the person performing the act of Hajj or Umrah, so during that time is a temporary close on getting married. For the person who's in the state of Ihram, him or her is not allowed to get married, nor can you participate in a marriage, you can't do a marriage. So all those things regarding marriage, then is not allowed what in the state of Ihram.
When you say participate, that means you can't be
A witness, you can't be an imam, you can't be a witness.
Can you be?
Nothing.
You can't be president.
Yeah, you shouldn't be a part of it, it shouldn't be occurring. And you'll be a part of it.
Say for example, you're muhrim down for Umrah.
Aye.
And I don't know, you're at the airport, you look at the airport.
No, if it's something, but if it was to occur, it's up and over there, and you're here sitting, mind your own business, then that's the next matter.
But you don't go and sit with
Hey, that's not worth it. You're there to be a witness to it, a willing witness, then no.
Similarly, it is prohibited for a muhrim man to conclude a marriage contract during the state of ihram, a state of ritual consecration, during Hajj or Umrah. The Prophet ﷺ said, a muhrim must neither marry himself nor arrange the marriage of another, nor should he make the proposal of marriage. Related by the group of compilers except al-Bukhari. A Muslim woman is prohibited to get married to a disbelieving or polytheistic man, for Allah exalted be He addresses Muslim women saying, and do not marry polytheistic men to your women until they believe. Surah Baqarah, ayat 221.
So regarding concerning a Muslim woman, that also that they're not allowed to marry a kafir of any type. So a Muslim woman is only allowed to marry a Muslim man. So they're not allowed to marry whether the person is a Christian or a Jew or anything else other than a Muslim man. So that marriage is considered to be invalid.
Likewise, a Muslim man is prohibited to marry a disbelieving or polytheistic woman. Allah exalted be He says, and do not marry polytheistic women until they believe. Surah Baqarah, ayat 221. Allah exalted be He also says, and do not hold to marriage bonds with disbelieving women. Surah Mumtahina, ayat 10. However, the aforementioned verse does not apply to Jewish or Christian free women, as it is permissible for a Muslim man to marry any of them. For Allah exalted be He addresses Muslim men saying, unlawful in marriage are chaste women from among those who were given the scripture before you. Surah Ma'idah, ayat 5. Scholars unanimously agree that this verse is regarded as an exception of the general rule stated in the aforementioned two verses, Surah Baqarah, ayat 221, and Surah 60, ayat number 10, which prohibited the marriage between disbelieving or polytheistic women and Muslim men.
Yes, the next case that I discussed regarding that لا يتزوج المسلم امرأة كافرة, that a Muslim man is not allowed to marry in general a kafira, a non-Muslim, except, and he mentioned the ayat that are general regarding ولا ينكحوا المشركات حتى يؤمنن, and that you're not allowed to marry a mushrikat until they have accepted Islam. Then also, so those verses regarding concerning in general, but then that ayat mentioned that al-muhsana min alladhina utul kitab min qabl, regarding concerning of those people regarding from the Jew and the Christian, that you're allowed to marry them. So mushrik, they show that al-kafir, no, with the exception, the kuffar, with an exception of Jew and Christian. So you're not allowed in general. So the person is said to be an atheist, or they follow, they are fire worshipper, or whatever. If they are not per se Jew or Christian, you are not allowed to marry them. So the person said, I don't follow no religion. then you can't marry them. So the discussion now concerns, so yes, there's a exemption to marry Ahli Kitab, which is Jew and Christian. The discussion now becomes how we define who said to be from Ahli Kitab. Clear? Who are said now? So find that to Ahli Kitab, that you find them of those who, so anyone who adhere, the ulama discuss, the person who is Ahli Kitab defined by the state that you live, by the state that is for example, a Christian country, Christian state. So whoever is the inhabitants of that country, then automatically you become a part of their faith. Can you live under that? Live in that country? Or is it the person who themselves identify themselves to that faith? Or is the person who they actually not identify, but they actually participate in the acts of that religion? We said there's a practicing Christian or practicing Jew. So how we defined who is such? So lengthy discussion between the ulama regarding identify exactly who they are, especially in our time, where you find that saying that you're a Jew or Christian sometimes can be very loose. So with this is the person who identify with that religion. The person who identify, and to identify doesn't mean the person have to be a staunch Christian in going to church every Sunday, going to all of whatever they do. That so the person can somewhat acknowledge that they are from that faith. Then khalas, and they can somewhat so the person adhere to that, or a person see themselves adhering to that faith. Then they're said to be the people of that faith. But overall, you have a discussion between the ulama regarding those things, regarding who said to be a Christian. Aywa.
A free Muslim man is prohibited to marry a slave Muslim woman.
So as I mentioned before, also with this concerning marriage, I said that sometimes is ignored. That the woman said, okay, I'm a Christian. As I mentioned before, concerned that for you to marry them and for everything to be proper, then also she has to come with her what? A Christian father or wali. So a wali that gives her away. So she can't come to the masjid and the brother said, come bring her to the masjid. And he get find two brothers or brought his witnesses. And then he gets another brother to act as her wali. Or he asks the Imam, can you act as her wali? Then no, it doesn't run. That's not valid. So she has to bring her wali from her faith. Bring her wali from her faith. So of the condition for her, and also said so she in that marriage will be valid. You have to have the wife and husband give consent. We say what about Ahli Kitaba? So she has to give her consent. She affiliate to that religion, consider herself to be a part of that faith of Christianity or Judaism. Of those that are said to be, even though they have between themselves in that faith, they have their own sects. But they are said to be of that faith. So she of the faith of Jew or Christianity, that our wali also have to be of that faith. Khilaf whether he has to be from the same denomination as Shias, or just generally say he's Christian under the banner of Christianity, as Christianity is seen as one, but they have division between themselves. But you have to bring someone to act. So you cannot bring a Jew to act as her wali if she's a Christian. Nor can the Jewish woman bring a Christian man to act as her wali. So he has to be from her faith. Also, the witnesses have to be present. The witnesses though have to be Muslim. If they then also she's deserving what? A mahar. So because she's Christian or Jew, it doesn't mean that she doesn't get a mahar. So she's also deserving a mahar as a Jew and a Christian lady in getting married. So all the thing that is required from a Muslim would be required from her, with the exception of someone from her faith have to act as her wali.
You see the condition of wali for that Jewish woman, Christian woman, is it the same as like a Muslim, for example? if a Muslim has a father who's alive and he's Muslim, then
And he's
he's Muslim, her father's Muslim, then he has, like, that's his haq to be her wali. So is that the same rule applied to the Christian woman or the Jewish woman?
the same will apply concerning that order concerns that either someone or she bring a representative, but ideally,
And it has to be with his consent in the same way.
and that representative also have to be with his consent. They have to be with his consent. So I said what applies to the Muslim would apply to her also. It applies to the Muslim. So regarding the rule of nikah would apply equally across the board. Aywa.
A free Muslim man is prohibited to marry a slave Muslim woman. As such, a marriage causes his children to be slaves of his wife's master. It is permissible to marry a slave Muslim woman only when one fears committing fornication and cannot afford marrying a free Muslim woman or afford the price of a slave woman to emancipate and marry her. Allah exalted be He says, and whoever among you cannot find the means to marry free, believing women, then he may marry from those whom your right hand possesses of believing slave girls. This allowance is for him among you who fears affliction, i.e. sin. Surah An-Nisa, ayah 25.
So they mentioned regarding this case, regarding that a Muslim man that can marry, regarding Amma Muslima, that with the condition, they mentioned 3 conditions. That one, that so ordinarily is not allowed, but it becomes allowed, like an exception is given with 3 conditions as mentioned. That one, that Muslim, one, that he fears that he will fall into, he fears for himself falling into sin. So he fears himself, and also that he doesn't want to remain as a bachelor for the rest of his life. So the second condition that Amma is that she's a Muslimah, so he cannot marry a kafira. And also it mentioned that in a case where he find that he cannot per se afford to marry like himself a free woman because he can't afford the mahar and the likes, he cannot afford the mahar. So if those conditions are there, then he can marry that slave girl with the conditions mentioned. Aywa.
A slave is prohibited to marry his mistress according to the consensus of Muslim scholars. This is because being a mistress of a slave contradicts being his wife, as the rights, duties and rulings are different in each case. Similarly, a master is prohibited to marry his slave girl. This is because the contract of possessing a woman is stronger than that of marrying her, and a strong contract cannot be combined with a weaker one. Having sexual intercourse with one slave girl has the same ruling as having sexual intercourse through a marriage contract, provided the aforementioned conditions are considered. In other words, those who are temporarily prohibited to marry, for one to marry, such as a widow or a divorced woman in her waiting period, a muhrim woman, a female fornicator, or a woman whom has divorced thrice, are prohibited for one to have sexual intercourse with as one slave woman. This is because if a marriage contract is prohibited as a means of lawful sexual intercourse in such cases, then having sexual intercourse with one slave woman with greater reason is prohibited in these cases as well.
So the mention regarding of those other cases regarding that not that a man can have a sexual relation with his slave girl, but also if he has relation with her, then the same will apply regarding that. He's not allowed then to have relation with those other group of women that would be from her family members, as we had mentioned before. So if he have relation with the slave girl, then he cannot also, then her mother becomes haram for him to have relation with. And as we had mentioned before, those group of women. So those group of women that's attached to her by way of family members that are of the forbidden group of 7, then they're out if you have relation with that slave girl. Also regarding, so that clear?
Even if the mother is a slave.
Even the mother is a slave, yeah.
So in that case, you'd have to choose one or the other.
Hey, so whichever way you go, then he has to deal with. He has to go one way. Whichever way that he goes, then the subsequent rules applies. Then so another thing regarding Malakat Yameen, that he may have, if he has 4 wives, and 3 malak, then that's still okay. So you can have, so they're not counted as wives. So they wouldn't be counted as wives. So that's concerning of those group of people that he mentioned regarding, or mentioned by the ulama, regarding of those women that is not permitted for one to marry due to those reasons. So of the reasons that have been mentioned, one, because of ad-nasab, blood ties, or they mention musahara due to in-law. Third, rada due to breast suckling. And the fourth that is mentioned is regarding mula'ana. Those ones have been counted now. So you have a second way that a group of people that it is due to circumstance you are not allowed to marry them. Due to outside of those circumstances, that due to certain circumstance you are not allowed to marry them, and sometimes that is a temporary, and sometimes that could be permanent. So that inshallah we have ended regarding this discussion regarding of those group of women. So it is mentioned that Islam can somewhat go into detail. So as Islam is there to uphold regarding maintaining that knowing each other, like knowing people's your family members, and knowing those people that is not that you cannot marry. So these things are mentioned in detail by specifying those group of people, so as to the person not to fall into acts that are forbidden. So with that, inshallah, will end for today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And the next bab, fi shurut fi nikah, which we'll discuss in the next lesson. وبالله تعالى توفيق وهذه السبيل. أيوة.
In terms of the question I want to ask, maybe I'll answer off camera. But actually, I'll answer because it might be beneficial to others. Because in mentioning about marrying Jews and Christians, in terms of their religion, marrying them because they have a specific religion. Now, if these people that call themselves Christians, similarly, a person might call themselves a Muslim and follow Islam, and you want to marry a specific lady and she calls herself a Muslim, but she does actions that kharaj min al-millah, it takes her out of Islam, but she considers herself a Muslim, but she's doing shirk akbar method.
Okay.
But she considers herself to be a Muslim. So you can't marry her if she's doing shirk, because shirk takes you out of the religion. So similarly, in other religions like Judaism and Christianity, how do you measure that this person is considered a Jew and this person is considered a Christian if they might be doing actions as Christians and Jews that take them out of their religion?
Okay, so go back to that. So in Islam you have things that we call nawaqil Islam, acts that action that a person may do that may remove them from the fold of Islam. So they are considered to be apostate. Sometimes the person may be involved, may not be aware that they're actually not a Muslim, but they think they're Muslim. So it comes so it will be that who the person made that call. It will be the person who have that ilm to make that call and judgment, right? So then, and that sometimes can be said that it requires a person of ilm to kind of make that distinction regarding the person said they're Muslim, but in reality they are not. And it means you have to look into matters. So that have its own procedures. And that's more complex. Islam have its procedure. I'm going to say it's complicated, it's as its procedures. But then with Christianity and Judaism, what do they have as nawaqil of their religion? And is there? You understand the question? So is there a thing that according to them remove them from their religion?
That makes them a Christian and makes them a Jew.
So you might answer, so a person might say, okay, there's a person so which act, according to the preaching of Christianity and Judaism, that if a person was to fall into those acts, they are considered to be non-Christian. You're not Christian.
Wouldn't it just fall into that when Christianity and Judaism it came as monotheistic religions, and they do polytheism?
Of the discussion between the ulama regarding Jews and Christian, they said that this shirk entered even while the Prophet ﷺ was alive, and still recognized them as being upon their religion. So concerning that a shirk has been with them for a long time. You understand? Been with them for a long time. But still because of some exception is given based upon that they were given books, revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they follow a portion of it, but they still have deviated from it long time ago. Now, but still because of a recognition that the prophet that they affiliates to were given revelation and a recognized prophet. Now, so that's the thing. So as for with that, so the thing of them, so said if we were to say them falling into some aspect of what we may say, well said, shirk, doesn't negate that they are not Christian. Because the one who said the early ones compared to the one before the Prophet and the Prophet said that they're completely different. Changes came in before the Prophet ﷺ regarding changes in their religion. So they said, no, tabdil, when this change came, it exists. While the Prophet ﷺ was alive, amongst the Christian and Jew, there are changes. Yes, some of them uphold Tawheed. We find that those amongst them who did not. And it was there. I said their religion, what they have today, even though said it's shirk. Because they worship Isa alayhi salam.
Some question I want to ask here. Some people, when they get married, for example, when they are pregnant, women, they don't realize they are pregnant. For instance, they might even have their menses. So I asked him, and said, yeah, with some women, they are going through menses, but they are pregnant. If a man gets married to this person, for example, then later on down the line, they found out that, okay, this pregnancy...
She was pregnant when he got married to her, but it was not known.
So what's the ruling?
And the marriage, the act is considered to be sahih. So the act of nikah, said if it was based upon they did not know, from what you're saying, they did not know, and didn't say any sign, then the act of nikah is considered to be valid. Huh? They did their due diligence, and from what they see, everything was clear. Some said that would occur because of because of zina occurred or something. But if make tawbah, you understand, or talaq and dinner. But
so women are just like that, even from.
But how is she gonna be pregnant before she get married?
Huh?
How is she gonna be pregnant before she get married?
She's been married before. She divorced, and she's pregnant. She didn't know she see her menses.
Okay.
And there's no sign that she
Them said that nikah, it then still said that so they either go back to she in her mind believe that she finished her iddah, which would be whatever her 3 months is or her 3 cycle, and everything seems to be okay. As you said, she's seeing her cycle, but later on, and she got pregnant after she ended her and when she ended her cycle or iddah of 3 months or 3 cycle, she got remarried. Khalas, it's valid. So if found it, and then said of those cases, it's not a common practice. Would be an abnormal case, but the marriage is still considered to be sahih.
When it speaks about obviously a person can marry 1, 2, 3, 4, is there anything that mentions about how many you can possess, how much slave girls you can have?
It is no number.
So a person could have 4 wives,
There's no number.
50 slave girls.
It is no number. So there's no number. So can't put a number to it. No, those things, there's no number mentioned. Somewhat opened, but realistically. Some of the only thing regarding concerns, so as for the wife, the number is restricted to the person not allowed to exceed. As for other things, then it is somewhat more open. It's more open. So that's it. So inshallah ta'ala, so we'll end for today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and continue.